So on 9/11, it was my sophomore year. I was at the University of Michigan, and I had a 9 o'clock class, which was a little difficult to get to some mornings, but I got to the 9 o'clock class, and we had barely started. I think we were maybe 10 or 15 minutes into the class, and they told students who had family, a lot of the students who are out of state that go to the University of Michigan are from New York State, and a lot of them from Manhattan, and they told anybody who had family or friends living in Manhattan that they might want to call their families because both of the World Trade Centers had been hit by planes, and there was, chaos and all this other stuff going on. Well, towards 9:30, they actually dismissed class altogether. They told all the students that they could go home, and I remember I was walking to where I lived at the time, and all of a sudden I saw a friend of mine who was just walking on University of Michigan campus, and they said, yeah, did you know that planes are also crashing in DC, which is where I'm from. I grew up in suburban Maryland, which is right outside of DC, about 15 minutes from the DC line, and I immediately became fearful for my family. Because DC is so close, there's a lot of errands that, my family runs in DC. My dad was working in DC at the time. I didn't quite know if my family was in DC or not at that point, but I was obviously fearful that they might be, so I was trying to contact them, but I know a lot of people can remember if they were trying to contact people in New York or DC at the time, a lot of the phones, you just couldn't get through to people. So I remember I was very panicked, but I went back to my apartment and, saw the coverage that was going on. And I remember my roommate at the time was actually from New York, and she and I were the only people living in the apartment who were not from the state of Michigan. And she and I sat in our room together pretty much the whole day watching the coverage. I did finally get in touch with my family. Luckily, nobody was anywhere near the Pentagon, which it ended up being the only place that was actually, hit. But I just remember being in my room and watching it all day, and still to this day, watching coverage of the day it still gets me tearful. It still puts, a feeling in the pit of my stomach just thinking about how horrible that day was. So.
How do you feel your life has changed since that day?
I think I always kind of knew I was going to be in news or something like that, and that's actually why I saved the paper from the University of Michigan from the day afterwards. And looking at it now, it kind of just makes me realize, how into news I was back then. But I think in terms of, safety and all that other kind of stuff, I've become a lot more vigilant in my surroundings and things that were going on around me. I lived in DC for, right outside of DC for several years after I got out of college. So you're always very vigilant about your surroundings, what's strange, what's not, what's normal, and that kind of stuff. And I really have changed in the sense that I don't hesitate in saying something. I think I might have not said something in the past before 9/11, just minded my business. But now I feel like it's all kind of our own responsibilities to make sure something like this doesn't happen again. Another thing that happened because of 9/11 was I went to go work for President Bush. And I think a lot of people will share the feeling that I did, that, were very impressed with his response to the actual 9/11 tragedy, not so much some of the other things that happened afterwards, but we're really confident in his work that he was doing in the war on terror to make sure it didn't happen to our country again. Just that it amazes me how much that event still affects me when I see it today. It's unlike so many other things that have happened in our nation's history because of how prolific video and all that other kind of stuff was. I feel like that event is just so different, and tragedies since then are so much like this. There's so much video, so many amazing images from that day that it brings you right back to that moment when it all happened. You know, you hear about, you know, the atom bomb being dropped, that kind of stuff, and there are videos of that, but, you know, the amount of images and video you get from this event just, it really makes it, you know, like it just happened. It feels like it was just yesterday. And I'm amazed by how much it can still affect me to see those images and to still be so like affected by it.